Hey everyone, it's Nick with the Whip Shop, and on today's episode we're going to be building from start to finish this 5-foot 10 plat nylon stockwhip. First and foremost, I couldn't have made this video without the help of my friend Adam Winrich, who generously gave me the plans to build this stock whip. I made one of these whips for the first time in Germany with Andrea Fischer, and when I came back, so many people were asking me, all but begging me to make a full-length tutorial. I texted Adam and said, hey man, everybody's asking for this. Is that all right if I put your designs out there? And he said, go for it. So this is an Adam Winrich stock whip. Hope you guys learned something. Hope you enjoy the build. I know I did. This is something different from what I've done in all of my whip making career. There's a lot of different things, different techniques that were foreign to me, that are new. So it was a really fun learning project for me, and I hope it is for you as well. Please reach down and hit that subscribe button if you didn't already. Head over to patreon.com where you can further support this channel. Also, make sure, if you haven't already, I don't know how you couldn't have if you're watching this video, but subscribe to Adam's channel. He's got some awesome material on there, some videos of his live performances at the Renaissance fairs, and he's starting to make some tutorials himself as well on his own channel. So check him out, like him on Instagram, like him on Facebook. I know all you guys have been wanting to see a nylon stock whip tutorial for years now, so finally, here it is. I hope you enjoy it. Alright, before we get started, let's go through the materials list that you will need to build this nylon stock whip. So 160 feet of parachute cord, first and foremost. Next, we'll need some artificial sinew, some hockey tape. Next, we'll need number 5 nylon thread, or somewhere in that ballpark. This is stuff that I found at the local Hobby Lobby, made by this company, Artiste. Great stuff for making crackers, and we're going to be using it to bind the keeper onto the handle of our stock whip. Next, we'll need some 3mm neoprene, or an equivalent thickness material. You can use leather if you want, about 3mm, and this is what we'll be using to build up our heel knot foundation. Next, you're going to want to have some paraffin wax and a means of heating it. This is what we will be dunking the whip into at the end of the building process. Make sure that you have enough wax so that your whip is sufficiently submerged to where none of it is exposed to the open air. I'm using a Nesco Roastmaster for my wax to heat it. You're going to be wanting the temperature to be between 180 and 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Be careful with open flame if you choose that method for heating your wax. Never heat paraffin wax with an open flame indoors. Lastly, we will need 5/8 inch dowel. This is oak. Different woods have different densities. Oak is a great in-between. It's cheap, and you can get it at most any hardware store. Make sure that you have 17 inches minimum for this. This piece is 3 feet long, and we'll be cutting it to length later. But you're just looking for that 5/8 of an inch diameter. On to the tools list. So here's the tools that we'll be using to build this nylon stock whip. Now I have them separated out. On the left side here, I believe these tools to be necessities. Without them, it'd be pretty tricky to get this whip done. On the right hand side here, I have some additional tools that you don't need, but they will make life easier and they'll allow you to get the project done quicker. Starting with the left side here, we need a staple gun, a Permalock lacing needle, tape measure, a utility knife, a lighter, scissors, a hot glue gun, a saw, and a clamp to hold your whip while you're working on it. The next thing you'll want are 3 pins or tacks. Moving on to the right side, we have 2 pair of hemostats, a pair of pliers, preferably needle nose, and a sharp fid or an awl. Now, last thing on this list would be a sanding wheel. If you have access to one, it'll really help you with the handle process later on. If you don't have one, it's alright. You can make do with a utility knife. It'll take a little longer, but don't get discouraged if you don't have one. You can use this and it'll work just fine. Those are the materials. Let's start building this whip. Alright guys, so the first step in building this nylon stock whip is to measure out 5 6-foot strands of parachute cord. So I'm going to do that right now. If you're using the coreless stuff, you have a head start. As I mentioned earlier, I had a few extra hanks of the 550 cord that does have inner strands, so I'm just going to use these up for the sake of the video, and I just wanted to use them up. There's 3 of them. There's 4 of them. And 1 more. There's 5 6-foot strands. Now I'm going to pull the inner strands out. Alright, I have cut and gutted my 5 6-foot pieces of parachute cord. I have them laying out on the workbench so it's easier for you guys to see what I'm about to do next. The next step is to pick a side, left or right, and stagger each one of these strands in 3-inch increments. So 3 inches, another 3 inches. It's hard to do this with one hand, but I'll have to set the camera down. Just 3 inches staggered. It doesn't have to be perfect because in the long run, we're going to go back and we're going to trim everything out. So get it as close as you can. Stagger the left in 3-inch increments, and then what we're going to do is take the right side and one by one fold those strands, and then where we left off, the longest strand over here will become the next step, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So as you can see, I've staggered each one of these strands in about 3-inch increments on the left side. Now, because all of these strands are exactly 6 feet long, if we stagger the left side and all of the strands are taut like this, automatically, well, the right side is staggered because they're all the same length. So the next step is to take the longest strand over here, fold it over, and that longest strand will become the next step to the shortest staggered strand on the left side. Okay? So we're just going to go ahead and do it. I'm grabbing the longest one over here, and I'm just going to match it up right there. So our 5th staggered one, we're just going to go 1 step down from that one. And now here we go again. The next longest one, we're going to grab that next. Sometimes difficult to do this with one hand. I apologize if it's... There we go. It may help if you have something to hold those strands down. Probably not if you're not filming and using 2 hands like you should, but for me, I'm going to do that. So here's the next one. Another 3 inches, roughly. And the next one. Like that. And the last strand. The shortest one in the sequence, like that. And I'm just going to go through here and just even things out a little bit. Like I said, in the long run, once we work our way up and find the middle and get some plating done, these strands will be trimmed, so you don't have to get it perfect. But we want to be as close as we can without being too fanatic about it. All right, so now we have all of these strands folded and staggered. There should be a total of 10 strands, 1, 2, obviously, all staggered, going from longest to shortest in a smooth, tapered motion. And that is what we're looking at right now. This staggered form here is what's going to give our whip taper, along with dropping of strands on the overlay, just like any other whip. So next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take up the slack here, and where we want the middle to be will present itself naturally. Right there. So here is the middle. I'm going to take my fingers and pinch it and keep hold of this just like that. So the next thing that I'm going to do is, right now I have the middle, the top here, marked because I'm holding it in my fingers here. I'm going to take my other hand and just do 2 fingers like this and let these rest right on top there like that. Now I'm going to take the other hand and I'm going to fold those. Now pay attention to the area that is draped around my 2 fingers. All of that is going to be braided in a flat braid, just like we would do with a wrist loop. That's going to become the keeper on the thong of the stock whip. Now I'm going to pick either the left or the right side. We'll go with the left side here that I'm holding. And now I'm going to take my hand like this, and I'm going to put this in a clamp just like that. Right where my finger is touching these 5 strands, that's where I'm going to put it in a vise. Now once again, this step does not have to be surgically precise. We're going to take this and I'm going to put it into my clamp, still holding the area that we want to be in the clamp. I'm just going to transfer that right there, keeping it marked. And we want all of these strands to be end to end on the sides. We don't want them to be stacked on top of each other at all. There we go. Now we can begin our flat braid. Now from here, like I said, from here to here about is going to be the keeper of the thong. We're going to do so by taking the 2 strands on the left and the right. Now we have 1 in the middle. I'm going to take a strand from the right side and put it underneath that one, like that. Now I'm going to grab the far left strand and I'm going to go over the next one and under the next one. Now I'm going to the right side, under or over the top and under the next, and there we go. Now we are in a flat braid, just like that, just alternating from left to right. Whatever this one does, we're doing the opposite. So it goes under here, I'm going to go over it. Never go over twice or under twice in a row, never. It's always alternating, just like that. Now the idea here, Adam suggests that we have about 11 bites, meaning that we want to see about 11 of these forming. If we braid for too long and more than 11 bites, 11 or 12, 10 or 11 or 12, that's where I like the range that I like to stay in. If we do too many, the whip will be too loose at the transition area where the keeper attaches to the handle. And of course, if we don't do enough, it'll be too tight. And that won't be nice. I'm just continuing this. And this is a particular part of the whip that would pull these in place very well. We want there to be some tension because this is the part of the whip that experiences some of the most stress. So counting this real quick, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That is perfect. So we want to take this out of the clamp. And when you're taking it out, try your best to hold those. We have 2 strands here in my right hand that face this way, and now I also want there to be 2 strands that face the same way. So just taking it out like this, that's what we want to see. 2 in the front and then 3 in the back on both the left and the right hand. And we have 11 bites. Okay, I have this little piece of 1/4" steel. I apologize for not mentioning that in the beginning. I have the materials or the tools list, but there it is. Screwdriver works, just a hook, something to hold things in place, to drape the keeper over while we get ready to plait. So I'm going to grab my whole assembly here. One last check. We can notice that we have a sufficient number of bites. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We have 11 bites right now, and that's just what we want. That's what Adam recommends. So I'm going to take this. We want to make sure that we have 2 strands in the front on both the left and the right side. If you don't worry about it. If you have 3 strands coming out here, do one more pass on the right side, and that will even things out. So if you don't have 2 in the front on the left and right, it's easy to get there. That's what we want. Just like that. So I'm going to drape this over our steel like that. And the next thing we want to look for is the strand that's on the top. It may be on the left or it may be on the right. The strand that's on the surface. Here it is for me. See how this one on this left side is going under. This one is going over. So we're going to start with that to make things easier. So that strand is going over the one underneath it. So we're going to go under on the left side. Remember what I said about you never go over twice in a row in this pattern. The same applies in the diamond. So we're going under and over. And here is our next strand. It goes under. So we're going to go over and under like that. And that is the beginning. That's what we want to see, and that's the first step in transforming this flat braided wrist loop kind of section that you would see. That's basically all it is, a flat braided wrist loop. And we're joining it together. 5 strands on the left, 5 on the right. This is going to be a little bit tricky to begin with. It was for me, that's for sure, because we're going to be plaiting over nothing. The strand on the top here points to the upper left. Same principle that we've been using for all of these videos that I've made. The top strand, here it is. I'm going to pull that around the back. It's going to feel weird plaiting over nothing. Now we're going to go over, under, over, under, and over like this. Once again, we have 5 strands in each hand. And after each pass of a strand, I'm going to pull everything nice and tight. Now, if this was a 12 plait, 6 strands over here, 6 strands over here, and we were doing a single strand diamond pattern, we would start by going under. Because it's an odd number of strands on the left and right, 5 and 5, we're going to start by going over. So now, alternating. Now we're at the upper right. I'm going to grab that upper right strand, there it is, around the back. Starting by going over, over, under, over, under, over. Always finishing with 5 and 5. That's going to really help you guys keep track of what's going on. So I just finished another strand pass, and here I go again by individually tightening all the strands. Now, something that Adam mentions with this build is later on, especially with the overlay, you don't really have to pull as tight as you do with a bullwhip, because we're just going to be letting the heat of the wax tighten our strands. Alright, so I have been plaiting about 1.5 inches worth of my diamond plait, coming right off of where the two ends of the keeper join each other here. And that, for me to begin with, it was very tricky, plaiting 10 strands over no core. But that's all about to change right now, because I'm going to, or I already have actually, cut a 27-inch piece of 550 parachute cord, ungutted. You want to keep the inner strands within here. So I'm just going to trim off the end here and just melt this down a little bit, and I'll be feeding it inside of my lacing needle like this, and this is going to become our core for this whip. Up through the bottom like this, just like that, up through the top. And just in the meantime, I'm going to tie it to my little hook here, just for the meantime. Once I get some tension established below here, when I go into the herringbone, I'll be untying this and then snugging it up and then pulling it into place. Just temporary, just to hold it for us. So now that that is in place and tied off temporarily, we can resume our plaiting. Now we are going from a single strand diamond plait to a herringbone. So surface strand on the upper right, we're going around the back, and this is just a simple under 3 over 2. And now we have a core. Even though it's a thin core, we have one. Under 3 over 2. I am pulling tightly to begin with, just to lock in that transition. But now I'm starting to relax a little bit here. Everything is feeling a lot better too that I have that core strand. It's a more familiar feel. And I'm just going to keep going with under 3 over 2. So I am continuing to plait my 10 plait herringbone. And something to think about here is once you get it, that's about 4.5 inches, I'm going to go ahead and untie my core strand and then just snug it into place. So I'm going to pull it until the tip seats itself right there in that crevice. Right there. Perfect. We don't want it to be sticking up too much, just right there. And as we plait down this belly, it'll tighten up and we won't have to worry about it slipping out. Now, something to consider here, which is completely different from any of the whips that I've ever made, is that we are only plaiting 10 inches. We're going to start here. So as you can see, we're only at about 3.5 inches, but we're going to plait only 10 inches here. And then we're going to stop and we're going to tie things off and we'll move on from there. But don't exceed 10 inches. Starting here, plaiting down. 10 inches is all you're going to do. So there we can see we are at about 10 inches. And at this point we're going to temporarily just tie this off with some tape. This is just going to keep our plaiting from coming undone there. And now we can just let things go and do what they want. we're going to take this core slash belly off of my hook here, and I'm going to give this a roll. Alright, so here we go. I'm examining our core slash belly of our nylon stock whip, and I'm getting ready to roll it. We don't need to roll it by putting it on the floor and putting all our weight on it, because we've plaited 10 strands around a relatively small core, a single strand of 550 parachute cord, so there's no need to apply so much pressure. As a matter of fact, I'm actually just going to roll it here on the workbench, and I'm using just this piece of wood that has some Plasti Dip sprayed on it, and I'm also using a piece of neoprene rubber to add some grip so it's not sliding on the slippery workbench. And it's not going to take a lot of pressure to round this off because of the fact that we've plaited it around such a thin core. And there we have our first belly, first and only belly of our nylon stock whip. The next step will be to lay this out and trim the strands to an exact length. Alright, so I have this thing laid out on the workbench, and the next step is going to be to trim our strands in a staggered pattern. I'm going to take a quick measurement here and just confirm that the longest strand is about 27 inches. So we want this to be our longest strand once we trim everything. So I'm literally going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut everything beyond to make sure that I'm pulling all of these to their fullest length. And everything, all strands longer than 27 inches, I'm going to cut them right here in the middle. And throw these away. Now, if you were making a longer whip, obviously those strands would carry on longer. So our next step is to stagger the strands. This is our longest one, and at this point I'm going to determine which one I want to be my shortest strand. And I'll just go ahead and pick whichever one is the shortest. Looks like it's this one. We'll cut it right at the tape. Like that. I'm just going to splay these out a little bit. This will be our next strand. We'll cut it about here. The next one will go here. And I'm just staggering everything from longest to shortest. This next one can be a little shorter. And now, as you can see, I have all of my strands trimmed out, and we can do some math here. From this point to this point is 17 inches. The entire length is 27 inches, so we'll subtract all of this. So if we divide 27 by 10 strands, we get approximately 2.7 inches increments here. So each step, each stagger should be about 2.7 inches. And there we go. We just have everything tapered out. We have our strands trimmed the way that will encourage taper. Okay, so we have our single belly prepped. The strands are staggered, and we're ready to take this thing to the next step. You may be looking at this right now and thinking to yourself, that seems awfully short, especially for a whip with a single belly. Keep in mind, though, the dropped strands from the overlay will be filling in, and I assure you that it will carry this whip out to its full length. Now, real quick before we start prepping the strands for our overlay, I want to talk about a little tip that helped me when I started making these stock whips. It's very beneficial if you use solid colors for your belly and for your overlay, and different colors at that. If you have separate different colors, not only does it add some interesting contrast to your whip and make it look more interesting, but it also helps you determine which strands are from the belly and which strands you are plaiting. And we'll look at that later. So I'm going to be using red, solid red for the overlay. I think that'll be an interesting combination with our dark gray. So I'm going to prep some strands and we'll get to plaiting. Now for our overlay strands, we are going to need 3 12-foot strands and 2 18-foot strands. And all of the guts of parachute cord need to be pulled out for all of these strands. There's one 18-foot strand. You don't need to watch me pulling strands out of parachute cord. I can't think of something I would not want to watch more than that. I'm sure you don't either. All right, I have cut my strands to length and prepped them, and they're all ready to go. I have 3 12-foot strands and 2 18-foot strands. Now I have all of these strands folded exactly in half. No staggering, exactly in half. Now know where the middles of each strand are. I'm holding them with my fingers, but don't tie any indicator knots, or don't cut them in half and fuse them together, or write on them with Sharpie markers or whatever, because they will be visible in the final product. So know where those middles are, but don't label them. For this next step, I have my belly. I'm going to slip the keeper over my little steel rod here, or whatever you're using as a hook. So that's in place. Next, I'm reaching for my 5 folded overlay strands. Now I'm still holding them at the exact middle. So a good, convenient way to do this I found is to keep holding on to the middle. And now I'm going to slide my right hand down, and I'm going to find the end of each strand, and that is what I'm going to be feeding through the eye of the keeper. There's our second one. 1, 2, 3. So 4 and 5 are coming. It's hard to do this by looking through the camera, I apologize. Almost to it. There they are. I still have the middle in my left hand of each strand. Very good. Now I'm going to, while holding on to those middles, it is kind of a pain if you accidentally let go, I'm going to slip all of these strands through the eye of my keeper, like this. And reaching around the other side, I'm going to pull all those strands through, like this. Some are already in place, others are not. The long ones will still need to be pulled further. There it is. And now, after removing a couple of annoying twists that just are natural to the process, I have the middles marked, and I'm sliding all those up until the middle is in the middle of my keeper. Just like that. At this point, I'm going to take 2 strands, pull them to the left side, make sure that I actually have the same strand. Okay, 2 strands, doesn't matter which ones, by the way, are on the left, and then another pair of strands are on the right, just like that, and one is in the middle, like that. Now keep in mind the middles are still resting on the keeper. The middles are here, and the middle is there. So where the keeper runs should be dividing all the strands directly in half. And this is where you want to be. See that? Alright, now this next step of tying this overlay in place, Adam describes as most likely the most difficult part in making the stock whip. So watch this video. I'm going to do my best to show as best I can of what I'm doing here. So first, notice I have 2 strands folded in half. Where they touch the keeper, that is the middle of each strand. There's 2 on the right. There's also 2 on the left, and we have our 1 strand folded and is resting at the base of the keeper. Alright, now we're going to start with this top strand, and we're taking the strands from the back and bringing them to the front. This strand here will go under 1 over 2. So under this one, which is really itself, and over the 2 in front of it, like that. And now the strand here that was in the middle becomes part of the right, as well as the back strand. We're also pulling that one to the right. Next, we're moving to our left hand side. The top left strand here, this top left strand here, we're going to bring that over everything like this, over 3. And after each pass, after I bring each strand to the front, I'm pulling everything tightly. Next, we're going back to the right hand side. Our next strand is this one. We're going to bring it under 2 over 2. So under these 2 and over those 2, just like that. Pulling again, nice and tight. Next, we're going back to the left hand side. Our next strand is this one. We're going under 1 over 3. So under 1 and over those 3 like that. Pulling it nice and tight. And lastly, we're going back to our right side here. We're going under 3 over 2. So under these 3 here and over 2. And now we are all set up to go into our 10 plait herringbone pattern. And once again, since I'm done, we really want to make sure that we're pulling these strands very tightly here, because this part of the whip does experience a lot of stress. If you want, you can individually tighten them up, or you can just rely on the next few strand plaits of the herringbone. So we have 5 strands on the left, 5 on the right. We're going to go right into the herringbone, around the back. Upper strand on the top points to the upper right, under 3 over 2. Now, something that is different about this stock whip is that Adam recommends that you don't pull the strands as tight as you would for, say, a bull whip. Actually, we're just pulling the strands into place, and we're letting the waxing at the end tighten everything, with the exception of this part here. We do want to pull these strands right off the bat. We want them to be tight, because we really want these strands to be constricting that keeper. So I'm going to be pulling these pretty tight. There we go. We can see this strand right now is tightening that up. See that? It's just what we want. There's another one there. And down we go. And once I work my way about 2 or 3 inches down, I'm really going to loosen up my tension. When I was working on one of these stock whips with Andrea in Germany, I had to keep catching myself because I'd find myself pulling tightly again because I'm so used to it. But because this is a stock whip, we don't have to rely on a bound transition for our springiness. It's just a simple joint at the end of the wood on the stock. You're getting all the leverage from your arm and the handle, so it doesn't have to be plaited nearly as tight. Now I'm starting to relax a little bit. Alright, so I am going to plait this whip in the herringbone pattern until I get to 18 inches. After I get to 18 inches, we will be dropping the first strand. Now there's something that I want to mention to you guys coming up here. Very soon we're going to be plaiting over an area where the strands are not bound together, they're not wrapped. So it's going to be kind of tricky to be plaiting if we use the method that I'm using right now, which is always holding on to our strands. The method that I'm going to encourage you guys to use is a method that is used by a lot of kangaroo hide whip makers. And that is to hold the core like this and hold that top strand with our thumb like this. It would actually be the left hand. If we're pulling strands from the left side, we're going to be holding it with the left hand. The reason that kangaroo hide and leather whip makers use this method is because when they are plaiting their whips, very, very oftentimes they're plaiting over loose tails like this of leather. And if they were to plait using this method, they would be mixing up those belly strands with their active strands. So doing this is a sure way to have those separate working strands from those tails that we will soon be plaiting over. Because these are a different color, it'll be a little easier for us, but still, if you use this method, it's going to feel weird. It still feels weird to me, as I've never plaited in that fashion. So the strand on the surface points to the upper left. We'll be holding it like this, and we'll be reaching through and grabbing that strand and then pulling it like this. And then we're going to be switching hands like this. So we're always holding on to those inner strands. And of course this will come into play, as I mentioned, later on. So still under 3/2, just a little different method of plaiting. I'm going to continue my way down, and I'll meet back up with you right when we get to the area above the tape. Alright, I've moved the whip into a clamp here to help me keep my seam straight. Some people will plait on a hook the whole way through. I didn't learn doing that, and it's more comfortable for me to have it secured in the vise like that, so that's what I'm going to do. We have arrived at the spot where we are touching the tape, so it is time to remove it. And this was just simply used to keep all of those strands in line. And this stuff sticks so well, I think I'm going to need to cut it. Of course, being careful not to accidentally cut my strands. There we go. And I'm just going to remove it. I'll plait a couple more strands the way that I'm comfortable with, that I learned with. And now I'm going to transition to the other method to help keep those strands separate from the active strands. So we're pulling from the left. So here I'm going to hold that with my thumb, reaching under. Just like that. And the reason that I didn't learn this, by the way, is the way that most whip makers plait. It is. You'll see a lot of people doing it this way, and that's the way I learned. And because I learned on nylon, all of the bellies were bound, and there were never any loose strands like this, with the exception of maybe the end of the belly. So there was never really anything I needed to hold separate from the working strands. And because of that, I didn't really find it necessary to practice this plaiting method. But this is the way the majority of, well, this was the way that the majority of the whip making world plaited their whips, but now the tides have turned. With nylon becoming so popular in the past few years, you don't see this much anymore. You still do with kangaroo hide whips. I am going to continue plaiting until I reach 18 inches measured from the crotch here, the crevice, all the way down. I'm going to stop at 18 inches and we'll be dropping our first strand. So we have plaited an entire 18 inches and it is time to drop our first strand. Now these first two dropped strands, the first one here at 18 inches and the second one at 21 inches, those two strands will become part of the core. So we're going to find our shortest strand from either the left or the right side, doesn't matter. So I'm going to find one of my short strands from the left or from the right. It doesn't matter which one. And here it is, right here, conveniently at the bottom. So I'm going to plait another strand over that. And I'll plait one more over it. And as you can see, the strands are becoming much more manageable at this point, meaning that there aren't a lot of tails anymore that we're having to plait over. So I'm going to confirm that this is the strand I want to drop here. And it is. That's good. I'm going to take it, swing it to the middle, and continue my plaiting. So now we're currently a temporary odd number, under 2 over 2 on the right side. But on the left, we are still under 3 over 2. Now here's a part where you may want to continue to do this method of plaiting, just because now we have a red strand introduced into the core, and that might make things a little bit more confusing. So I'm going to actually switch back over to this method here, just so I can hold my core strands and I can have things situated more conveniently, and I can see what I'm doing more. Still in that odd number for a little while. And I'm going to continue to plait. I'm going to continue plaiting until I get to 21 inches, and we will be dropping another strand, this time on the left side. And we are now down to the 21 inch mark, so we're going to drop another strand, this time from the left side. So we'll be dropping this one next. And this strand will also be dropped into the core and become part of the core. So you can see strands are really filling in. The overlay dropped strands are filling in and ensuring that the whip is carried out to its full length. So making sure that this is the correct strand, and it is. Giving it a pull and giving the one underneath it a pull and swinging it to center stage. That's its final resting place. Now we are in an even 8 plait. And we can continue our plaiting. Alright, so we have 2 strands dropped into the core. For the remainder of our dropped strands, whenever we drop one, we will be snipping a strand from the core, so things don't stay too thick, and we can make sure we have a nice even taper. So you can see I'm using the method of plaiting that I'm more comfortable with, which is just holding each side instead of holding the core. The reason I'm able to do this is because things are manageable. We're only working with a small number of strands in the core. So continue plaiting until you get to 30 inches, and we will drop an additional strand there. I'll meet you at 30 inches. Okay, here we are at the 30-inch mark, and it is time to drop another strand. Since we started with the right side and then moved to the left, now we are back on the right side. So we are going to be dropping one of the short strands. We'll drop this one, and just so we are able to drop that one, I'm going to back up one. So now we'll be able to drop it. Now when I drop this strand, I'm going to cut out one of the strands from the core. Which one am I going to cut out? The shorter one. So we'll be cutting this one, and I'm going to just tie a little knot in it as a quick reference indicator that lets me know that that's the strand that I'm going to cut out. Now here is the strand that I'm dropping. I'm going to give it one pull, swing it to the middle, and then I'm going to plait a couple of strands here. I'll just do one. And now we are going to cut that core strand out of the middle. So looking down here, here it is. I've indicated it. And I'm going to cut it. And now I still have two strands as my core, but now I am once again in an unbalanced plait number. So on the right side we're going under 2 over 1. On the left side we're still under 2 over 2. I'm going to continue plaiting. And here we are. We have arrived at about 34 inches, and it's time to drop another strand from the left side. So when we do that, which strand are we going to cut from the middle? Once again, the shorter one. Whenever we are dropping strands after the 30-inch mark and we need to cut a strand from the core, we're going to be cutting the shorter of the two. So I'm going to find my short strand on my left side that I want to cut. We'll cut this one. Excuse me, we'll drop this one, not cut it. There it is. Now we're going to plait it. And this drop here will put us in an even 6 plait. Still got 2 in the middle. Once again, I'm not pulling these strands as tight as I would for a bullwhip because we're relying on the wax to tighten the strands. I am pulling them snug though, but I'm not pulling nearly at the tension I would for a bullwhip. Alright, and let's find that strand. Here it is. Give it a pull, give the one underneath it a pull, and swinging it to the middle. And now we're going to cut one of these strands because we don't want to have 3 in the core. So I'm going to find the shorter strand. Here it is. We're going to cut it out a little shorter. I don't want there to be a bulge there. And now we are in an even 6 plait, maintaining 2 strands for our core, and continuing to plait. Down the whip. And each time I'm dropping these strands, make sure that the one that you just dropped, you're giving a little tug on. There you can see it's tightening up there, and the one underneath it. Don't forget to give those dropped strands a little tug. Continuing on in 6 plait. Here we are at about 38 inches, and now I'm going to drop another strand from the right side, the shortest strand. This is the last 12-foot strand from the right side. This is the one that I'm going to be dropping. We're nearing the end of our thong. Here it is. I'm going to plait one more strand over on top of that to secure it, and now I'm going to swing it to the middle like I've been doing right there, and then again cutting the shorter strand from the middle. And now we are temporarily having an odd number of strands. On the left side, under 2/1, and on the right side, under 1/1. And after a few strands have been plaited into place, I'm going to give that a little tug, and we can see that tightening nicely. And I'm going to continue plaiting. Alright, we have arrived at about 40 inches, and it is time to drop our final strand when it comes to this traditional plait. We will be dropping more strands when we're in our tapered twist, but this is the last dropped strand that will make it a 4 plait. Here's the strand that I'm going to drop. So we will do so now because it is in place. There's a pull there, a pull for the strand below it to help secure it, swinging it to the middle. And you guys know the drill by now. I'm going to be cutting the shorter strand out of the middle. And I'm looking through my viewfinder right now, so I have to be careful that I cut the correct strand. There we are. So temporarily is the key. I'm going to be in a 4 plait with 2 strands in the middle as the core. But quickly we will transition to having 1 strand in the core, and after that, none. It'll be a 4 plait over nothing temporarily. And it is at this time I am going to cut one of the 2 strands out of the core, the shorter one. This is about 41 inches here, 41 and a half roughly. So now we are in a 4 plait over 1 strand, and this is really helping the taper come together here towards the end of the whip. And a little ways down, I'm going to be snipping that last strand out of the core. So just an even 4 plait. Okay, we are at about 47, 48 inches, and it is time to say goodbye to our core as we know it. Nice scissors. And now we will be plaiting 4 strands temporarily over nothing. And I'm going to pull these a little bit tighter than I was pulling earlier, just because we have nothing underneath it, and I want to make sure that that transition from core to no core doesn't present the opportunity for a weak point. And as you can see, you can see some fraying areas here, as well as up the whip, and those are just from the dropped strands. We're going to go through afterwards and trim those and burn them, melt them, and they won't be noticeable anymore. Continuing in 4-plat over nothing. So we have arrived at around 49 inches in total length here. We are in a 4-plat. We've been platting over no core, and it is time to begin our twist. We're going to do so by starting in this orientation. We have the strand on the surface here on the right side, so we want it to look like this. If it looks like this, back it up one or go forward one. So there's our starting point. I'm going to take this strand from the upper left, pull it between these two strands, and I'm going to start twisting it. And I'm going to lay it over these two strands here, like this. This strand will be dropped. We won't worry about it anymore. I'm going to take these and pull them tight like this. And now I'm going to spin these strands like this. I'm going to twist them. And there we have begun our 3-strand twist. And at this point, this is where it can be very convenient if you have a pair of your hemostats. And I'll show you why that's so convenient. We can take them and clip them on our strands, and these will be doing the twisting for us, so we don't have to wear our hands out. And this is a method I learned from Anthony Nunnally, a cow whip maker. And now we can just twist each one of these, and there we have a nice twist developing. Working my way down. And this twisted section, you can kind of play with. If you have a whip that you want to be a certain length, this tapered, twisted section is an area where you can improvise with. Doesn't have to be perfect. If you want to get a few more inches out, you can. So I already have them twisted, and now I'm just interchanging them and pulling them like that. And if you use these hemostats, I find that I can get the tapered twist a lot tighter than I can using my bare fingers. Some guys like Adam, I've seen him do it. I can't do it like he can. And we're going to move down. And pretty soon we will be dropping a secondary strand from the left side. I'm going to be taking a measurement soon, an overall measurement, to make sure that we are on schedule for the correct length of the whip. At this point, once we get the 2 strands on the left side, I'm going to unclip, find the shorter of the 2 strands, and that will be dropped. So I'm going to re-clip on to the longer strand of the 2 on the left side, rewind it, or wind it up again, and continue twisting. I'm going to move the other one down too. And this strand will be dropped. Going to pause for a moment, like I said, and take an overall measurement of the whip. Alright, I've been twisting here, and the 5-foot mark is about right here. I want this whip to be 5 feet long. As you can see at this point, you could carry that twist on a little bit more. You could decrease it. I've found that with stock whips, getting an exact measurement or an exact length for a whip is a little more easy to achieve because you have this tapered section. So this is 5 feet. I'm going to unclip my hemostats. And at 5 feet, I'm going to take one of my hemostats and clamp that. And I will now prepare a 1.5 foot fall. 3-foot piece of gutted parachute cord, melting one end with the lighter. Feeding it into my lacing needle. Finding the middle. Done this many times. Making our fall. Okay, I have my fall all ready to go, and I've opened up an eye on it. This fall is 1 foot 6 inches. That's ready to go. I'm going to take off my hemostats there and slip the end of the whip through the eye like this, and then I'm going to tighten it back up. Just like that. And I'm just going to raise this up a little bit and just let it hang out there behind. Now notice here I have gone ahead and I've trimmed these last 2 strands to about 8 inches each, just so it's a little bit more manageable. Making sure that these are pulled tightly, and we can begin to tie the fall hitch. So I have these crossed, starting with the left strand. I'm going to go around the back, and I'm going to come between the fall and the end of the whip like this. And the same thing I'm going to do with the other strand, going around the back like this, and then in between the fall and the twist of the whip, just like that. Got some dust there, throw that out. And now I can pull this fall into place like that. Now the last thing that we want to do is we want to take these 2 strands and we want to go around the back and tuck them underneath the fall. And the reason we're doing that is so things don't come undone. So I'm going to open that up. Open up an eye with my Permalock needle, and then I'm going to stick the hemostats in there and open that up a little bit. Now I'm going to start with the right side. This part is a little bit difficult, around the back, and I'm going to go through the top of that. So I'm actually going to take a pair of scissors, going to cut a slant in this, take a lighter, just how I would if I were going to be just how I would do if I were going to be fitting this inside of my lacing needle. I'm just going to create a little point there, and I should be able to slide that through once I open up this part, opening up the eye of my fall. Can just about see it. Getting my pliers, and we can pull that through like that. That's the first one, and doing the same with the other strand around the back, and then we'll cut it and melt it. And if you wanted to, you could even thread your needle onto it. I'm gonna do it. And through the fall. So there we have it. Once I've snugged everything up, I'm pulling the fall itself. I'm pulling these strands here. I am going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut these things, and I want to leave about 3/4 of an inch, like that. And now I'm going to come back and just melt the ends of these so they do not fray. And there is our fall hitch on the Stockwhip. Alrighty, so once again I have my whip back slipped over that 1/4 inch steel rod, just to have it stretched out here. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to snip these 2 dropped strands. Zoom in. There's really nothing fancy about the way that I'm doing this. I'm taking the strand and I'm just going to give it one last pull, and I'm just going to snip it and melt it, leaving about maybe a millimeter or 2. That's actually a little bit long right now. And I'm just going to melt that. And then just like that. Make sure there's a nice broad head on the top there so it doesn't poke back through when we go to roll our whip. We'll be doing the same for this one. One last pull, and we're going to snip it. And there we go. We just ran out of fuel. Alright, lastly I'm going to give the thong of the whip a roll, and we'll be able to move on to step 2 of this video, which is the handle. Now I have here a sheet of 1/4 inch neoprene. If you guys watch my videos, you know that I speak very highly of this stuff. And this is just going to protect the whip from dirt, and it's also a very grippy substance, so instead of sliding the whip on the cold concrete floor, it'll force it to roll. I'm using just a piece of wood here, and I've coated it with a layer of Plasti Dip, the spray. So we have 2 sticky, grippy surfaces that'll roll this whip nicely for us. Now if you need to, something that's nice about rolling a Stockwhip thong is that you have a loop at this end. So if I wanted to, and I think I do want to, I'm just gonna, slip actually a better way to do it would probably be this way. I'm just gonna take a piece of parachute cord here and just tie a knot in the end so that it's one piece. And then I can just tie a little lanyard knot like this through the eye, like that, and then I can just slip this under the leg of this ladder here. And now I have it secured so I can hold it with my left hand and roll with my right. Look at how convenient that is. So I'm just going to roll this thing out, make it nice and uniform, even out the tension on all those strands, and the thong will be complete. Alright, we've rolled it. The thong of our Stockwhip is 100% complete. The next step is to begin with our handle. You guys see this? You see this right here? This, my friends, is perfect weather for whip making. Let's go get started on the handle. Alright, I have just cut off a 16-inch section from my dowel rod. Next, I've made two measurements here. The first measurement is at 3 inches, and this is where the keeper will be bound onto the handle. The next measurement I made is 9 inches. This will be where the plaiting is covering the handle. Now this 9-inch mark is made from right to left. This 3-inch mark is made obviously from left to right. So this is the only portion of bare wood that we're going to be seeing on this particular design. So the next step is to cut out a very mild rebate into this 3-inch section. We want to start here, and we want the diameter to be slightly decreased here. At the end, we'll be leaving a little button. And what this is going to achieve is it's going to allow the keeper section to be a little closer to being flush to this handle, the overall diameter. Secondly, that little button at the end is going to stick out, and it's going to keep that thong of the whip in place from sliding. That button, combined with some wrapping with our nylon thread, will help achieve this. At this point, it is very useful if you have one of the sanders that I'm going to be using. It'll help expedite the process. But if you don't have one, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, you can use a utility knife like this. And you can just, kind of whittle that down a little bit. The whole thing. I happen to thankfully have access to a sanding wheel, so I'm going to be using that. So the general idea is you want this to be pretty subtle, but at the same time you do want this to be slightly tapered like a cone down to this button at the end. As you can see, I've created a flare there. We'll be rounding that off at the end, but I'm just trying to get a nice gradual taper on this sander. The next thing I'm doing here is I'm just taking the top part of the sander, the edge, and I'm just kind of creating a circular little trench there, as well as at the top. This just helps things from sliding, and I'm achieving this by doing this. So I'm liking the looks of that. I'm going to take off just a little bit more, and then we'll start rounding off the button at the top. So here is the final product on our rebate So you can see it just slightly tapers down, and this is something that it does not have to be perfect. I'm pretty happy with the results here. It's not an exact science. So you can see here's some examples of other stock whip handles. It's the same general idea. I think I spent a little more time on this particular one than most other whip makers do. But that is going to achieve the fit that we're looking for. So you can see the button has a little indentation up there that goes around 360 degrees. It's going to help the keeper to stay in place. There's a button on top that's been rounded off a little bit. And then we have the same little indentation that goes around, and from this little indentation here to the top of the button, that is your 3 inches. So the next step will be to flat braid our keeper for our handle. This will be done in 7 strands. I've cut 7 16-inch strands here, and I'm going to pull the inner strands out of all of these. Now I'm going to take the ends of these 7 strands and stick them in my clamp, and I will begin my flat braid. So next I have my 7 16-inch strands, and I'm going to put them into my clamp here. And this is just like it was with the belly of the whip. They need to be sides touching only. Make sure that they are not stacked on top of one another. Just like that. And now we can begin plaiting a 7-strand flat braid. And this is the same principle applies here. Take 3 on each side. I'm going to take this one. I'm going to cross it over like this. Next, I'm going to take the strand from the furthest side on the left. I'm going to go over, under, and over like that. Far right, alternating, over, under, and over. Now I think a helpful tip here for you guys might be to never have fewer than 3 strands on the left or right. I mean, you could technically take the next strand, but then things would be kind of off balance and there's no reason. Keep it balanced if you can. Obviously you can't have an even number of strands on the left and right because it's an odd number, but just try to keep it as balanced as possible. For example, I have 3 on the left, and then that's good. I'm going to alternate back to the right side. Left side, over, under, and over. Right side, like that. And a flat braid is a flat braid, quite frankly. It's really the same thing. However many strands you are using. This is the weave that you see when a rug is made. Even fabric has this basic checkerboard pattern. The shirt that you're wearing most likely has it in various places. And that's looking good. I'm gonna keep on going. Alright, I have flat braided this keeper all the way down to where I really don't have enough strand left to work with. So I'm gonna take a pair of hemostats and clamp that right there so it doesn't unravel. And I'm going to be doing the same thing to the other side. Just like that. Ha! Nice. Alright, so I've taken my flat braided keeper here, and I'm going to set it aside. If you don't have a pair of hemostats, a couple pairs, that is, you can just use some tape to hold them together and keep it from unraveling. Now I'm reaching for my wooden handle. I'm going to put it in my vise, and you'll notice I'm not doing anything to protect the wood. That's because this part is going to be covered up by the handle platting. Nice and sturdy in the clamp. Now we're going to focus on the top part, and we're going to assemble, or we're going to install, that is, our keeper. Now for this next step, I'm reaching for a couple of things. One, I'm reaching for my keeper. The other thing I'm reaching for is a spool of artificial sinew. I'm going to take my keeper like this. I'm going to line up the ends so I'm roughly grasping about the same on each side, left and right. Follow my way up to the top here. This will be the middle. I'm just going to fit it on here and hold it. And the idea is to have about 2 fingers, my ring finger and pinky, of space in between there. Now I understand everybody's got different sized fingers. So I have a pair of, I have a caliper here. I'll get an exact size for you guys. Like that. And this will stretch out just a little bit. So we want about 25 or 26 millimeters tall here. Next, I'm reaching for that artificial sinew, and I'm going to tack this on lightly. And this is just to temporarily hold things in place. Excellent. At this point, we can take off our hemostats, or you can take the tape off if that's what you're using to hold it in place. And we're going to make sure that we have this even on the left and the right. At this point, we can take a pair of scissors and trim everything beyond this little notch here. In other words, this area where the keeper is going to be bound on, everything south of where that rebate ends can be trimmed. And we'll do this just to help ourselves out. At this juncture, we're going to go ahead and unravel each side of the keeper all the way up to our artificial sinew. Now do this gently as to make sure that you don't accidentally take this or remove your artificial sinew like that. The next step is to just kind of pull these strands so that they're more often than not just kind of side to side touching. I'm going to do this to both sides. So that looks good. And as you can see, if we rotate around, we can see that all these strands will sufficiently cover 360 degrees around the handle. Now we're going to take this out of the clamp, set it on the flat workbench. What we're going to be doing here is taking each strand and we're going to fray it. It's something that typically we want to avoid when making whips. We're just going to start at the end, taking that needle and just working our way all the way up. And we're going to do this to every strand all the way up to this transition area here. Now the reason we're doing this, the best analogy I can think of is pixels on a TV. The bigger the pixels are and the fewer pixels there are, these represent pixels. We have 7 folded strands. Let's say we have 14 pixels right here. You can only do so much with 14 pixels. The image won't be very fine. It'll be very blocky, like Minecraft, if you've ever played that game. If we take each one of these strands and do this fraying here, now we're exposing hundreds of strands within each strand. So if we do this to all the strands here, we tuck them in, it'll be a much smoother handle other than these bulky single strands, which we'd be able to see bumps and lumps. It'd be hard to keep them in line, and it'll just be one consistent thickness. That's why we're doing this. It's basically like untangling messy hair. That's a good way to look at it. It's not as daunting as it seems. We've got just a few left here that we're working on. As you can see, what we're going to do here once we get all of these things untangled is we're just going to get some water involved here, and wetting down these frayed sections makes everything a lot more manageable. Alright, so all of the strands have been frayed like this, and I just grabbed a brush. You don't have to do this, but it helps. Very good. Now what we're going to do is wet things down to make it a lot more manageable. And this water will eventually evaporate, so you don't have to worry about it affecting anything. Now you can already see we don't have to worry about any lumps or strands overlapping because it's so fine. All of those individual strands are being used now, and we can take advantage of them like this. The next step is to find the spot right here, and we're just going to trim all the way around here. There we go. We don't have to get that perfect right now. We'll trim it up later. So now we can grab our nylon thread, preferably size 5, number 5 nylon thread, and begin wrapping this. Now for this next step, I've cut off 12 feet of my nylon thread, number 5. And the next step is to just take something like a hook or an eye like this, and I'm going to tightly secure this nylon thread, one end of it, in this hook. Now you're going to want this to be very secure, as we will be applying a lot of pressure and we'll be pulling pretty hard on this thread while we're wrapping. So just make sure that it's not going to go anywhere. So one end of this 12-foot piece of nylon thread is in the hook that I just showed you. The other end I'm going to hold in my right hand, and this is just going to be laid parallel with the other frayed strands of the parachute cord. Just going to hold that with my thumb like this, and I'm going to begin wrapping like this. Now I'm going to start this like this, but then I'm going to walk out to the full length and continue wrapping by twisting this thing. Now try as best you can to have this thread not overlap the other one, but instead have it right next to it. This is a tricky part, for me anyway. Just like that. And once I've established a few pretty secure wraps, I'm going to take either my scissors or a blade, and I'm just going to cut off the temporary artificial sinew that was holding everything in place for us. Make sure you don't let go of that thread. We can throw that away. Now we're going to walk out to full length, and I am just going to continue wrapping. Notice I'm spinning this like this, trying my best to have the strands lay into place to where the sides are touching, but they're not overlapping each other. I'm just going to keep on winding, making sure that all of the tassels are distributed evenly, like we talked about earlier. And keep on wrapping. here I'm going to try to give you guys a better view of what exactly I'm doing. I'm just twisting this and I'm winding it up so that each wrap doesn't overlap. I just want them to be, each wrap to be butted up against the previous wrap. So hopefully you can see how that's turning out. I keep getting a little closer here. I don't enjoy this part whatsoever. Some people do. This is a very common practice in stock whips. Kangaroo hide stock whips. So I'm always making sure that when I'm wrapping, we don't want to see anything like this. We just want all that to be distributed evenly. That's very important. And we can keep taking little peeks and seeing where that rebate ends. So right there. Keep on wrapping. Okay, once we are about 1/4 of an inch away from where our rebate ends, as you can see we are, I am going to take a piece of artificial sinew and I'm just going to make a loop here. And this is what we're going to use to pull this back over on itself, underneath itself. I've used this method many times. And we're just going to be applying it to the stock whip build here. So there's the loop, as you can see. It's just about a 5 or 6 inch piece of artificial sinew. And I'm just going to wrap over it as if nothing ever happened. So we're almost to our rebate. Sorry, this is very, very, very challenging holding everything in the frame. And then we're just going to keep wrapping. Now, how tight am I pulling on this? It's kind of a tricky question. I'm not sure. I would say 1 pound, maybe 2 pounds. It's deceiving. You may feel as though you have to pull very tight, but you don't. The sheer amount of wraps will hold things in place. So don't be pulling and pulling, because you can actually break your nylon thread. Let's take a look, a little peek here where we're at. We're just about on the rebate. Another couple more. There we go. And we're almost there. We're just going to go over it a couple more times. And right there is exactly what we want. I'm reaching for my scissors over the camera. And cutting my thread here with plenty of slack there. And now I'm going to take this here. I'm going to take the thread and put it through the loop like that, and that is going to be pulled underneath the others like that. And now we can trim that. We'll be neatening things up quite a bit. There we go. There's the rough draft, if you will. We'll be cutting strands and making things look a lot better. As you can see right here, I had to splice in more thread because I gave myself the wrong measurement. How unfortunate. Anyways, I've taken the knife out of the holder. I just think it's easier for me personally to be more precise when I take the blade out. I'm just going to rock the blade forward, being ever so careful not to cut the thread. We can get a nice clean cut here. And I'm just trimming away the excess nylon from the keeper. Well, at this point it is time to cut our strands for our handle. I have here 6 42-inch pieces of parachute cord that have all been gutted, and 3 of them I have gray and the other 3 are in red. These are all going to be folded in half to make a 12 plat. So the next step is going to be to take some hockey tape, throw our handle in the vise, and then we're just going to take the hockey tape and wrap that bare wood that is very slippery. So I've got my handle in the clamp. If I peel this back a little bit, you can see this is the 9-inch mark. So that's how we know where we're starting with this tape. And I'm just going to spiral this down. All the way to the end. And cutting it at the end. You just fold that down, doesn't have to be perfect. And there we go. You can feel this is really sticky and very grippy. That's just what we want. At this point, it is time to find the middles of our cut strands and lay them out and prepare for the square start. Alright, I have all 6 of my strands. I'm going to separate them by color, red and gray, and I'm finding the middles of all of my strands. Once I've found the middles, I'm going to drape them over. Here's the middle right here of this group of strands. I'm going to drape them over my handle. And I'm going to take my other strands and do the same thing with them. There's the middles right there. And I'm going to drape them over like this. There's the middles. I'm now going to take pairs, 3 pairs, next to their colors. And this, of course, can be a solid color if you wish it to be. That's fine. I'm doing it in multicolors here so you guys can see better what I'm doing. This is the square start. This is a 12-plat square start. I used to be scared to death of this, and up until recently I couldn't do it. I found a very helpful video by Tyler Blake of Exo Whips. His video was the only one where I could actually see what was going on. Mind you, it still took many tries, but I finally was able to achieve this square start, and I wouldn't have been able to do it without Tyler Blake of Exo Whips, so I want to thank him. Step number 1 is to take each one of these and create an X. We'll make the grays be on the surface and pointing to the upper left. Now at this point, what was very helpful to me is to use tacks, thumb tacks. I have 3 of them, so on each X, I'm going to drive a tack into the wood. Excuse me. And that's going to hold our strands in this pattern. Now this is something that is good to do when you're starting out with this because it looks so much less hectic. You don't have to do it, but it really does help hold things in place. And there is the pattern we want to see. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So step number 1, we want to locate this middle right here, the middle X. Now I'm going to take this red strand here. Now notice how this red strand goes under this gray strand. We're going to go over it like that and hold these 2 there. I'm just going to set this aside. Now I'm going to take the gray. The gray goes over on the top assembly. So we're going to go under. And we'll move these up there. So here is one of the squares. That's what we should see. At this point, we can now get this last 3rd group involved. We're going to take our red strand, and we're just going to do the opposite of what the red strand does north of this assembly. The red strand goes under here, so we're going to go over. Next, it goes over, so we're going to go under. And that's it. I'm going to let that go aside. Looking at our gray strand here, what does the gray do? Here, it goes over. We're going to do the opposite. Under, over, like that. I'm going to drive these tacks in a little further because they're getting a little loose on me. So that is the beginning of our square start. This is the most important part right here. You'd want to see this in 12 plat. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our red strand here and we're going to go over and under like that. And just let it drape down there. Then we're going to take the next red strand and we're going to go over like that. And that's all we're going to do on the right side. That's it. Next, we're going to the left side. Our top gray strand, notice here we're going to do the opposite. So this is going to come under, over like that. And then the next one in line is going to go under. Just like that. And now we are at the beginning of our square start. The next step will be finding the strand on the surface, and we can't see it because the pin is covering it up. The strand on the surface points to the upper left. There it is. This is our active strand. The same principle is true. Now do your best. In one foul swoop, I'm going to take all these tacks out. And here is the beginning. Strand on the surface points to the upper left, this gray one. Here's our strand. We're going around the back. Do your best to hold your thumbs on there. Now see this red strand here? This red strand I'm pointing to with my right thumb. It goes over. So we're going to take that gray strand from the other side, and we're going to go, bear with me, under that one, over, under, over, under, and over. And there is our first strand. At this point, we can take everything, make sure that we have an even number of strands in each hand. In my right hand, I have 6. And in my left hand I have 6. So now I'm just going to gently take each one of these strands and pull all the slack out of it. And the way we measured these strands out, we gave ourselves more than we needed. And the reason we did that was because we may or may not be in the middle here right now. And I think it's important to give yourself some room for error, especially when you're starting this for the first time. So that's why these strands are much longer than they need to be. Maybe not much longer, but there is some room. So as you can see, that's starting to materialize. That is the square start. Then we'll plait the next strand in the sequence. The strand here on the top, right here, points to the upper right. Here it is around the back. And now we're good to go. Under, over, under, over, under, over. And that's it, guys. That is the square start. Now, all we're doing is a standard 12 plat diamond pattern single strand. Pretty soon, we're going to move this up. We can actually do it right now. Look at how well that hockey tape is working. It's very grippy. And I'll move the camera all the way up to our top here. That's where we want to be. Next strand. Upper left, around the back. Under, over, under, over, under, and over. And you can continue this diamond plait as long as you want. Then you can go into a herringbone pattern if you wish to. Oftentimes Adam will continue a single strand pattern here. Here's one of Adam's beautiful stock whips here. As you can see, he's carried on that single strand diamond for 1 inch to 1.5 inches to really lock that in place. I recommend doing that too. There's soccer practice across the street. No one's getting hurt, don't worry. And I'm just going to continue this single strand diamond pattern. So I feel like everything is locked into place with this single strand diamond plait here. I'm going to go ahead and transition into just a herringbone under 3/2. Sorry, under 3/3. And I'm going to continue with that all the way to the end of this handle, under 3/3. I'll meet up with you an inch before the end. Now we are really nearing the end of our handle here in our herringbone pattern. Pretty soon I'm going to tie off these strands so you can see I don't have a lot to work with and pull on. So I've finished at the end of my handle, and I've taken some hockey tape and just tied off those strands, making sure that that is indeed the end of the wood right there. Going to come by with my either scissors or a sharp razor blade and trim all these strands flush with the end of the wood. And to ensure that this is not going to slide around, I'm going to encourage it with some artificial sinew at the end of the whip there. Excellent. This handle is ready to be rolled. Alright, so the handle is out of the clamp and I have it resting on a sheet of 1/4-inch neoprene and then a rolling board here that's been coated with Plasti Dip. There we go. So the next step that I want to take is to bind up a little bit of a foundation here with some artificial sinew at the end of my wrapping where the binding stops. After that's done, I'd like to add a simple 5x4 Turk's head knot here. So I've got the handle back in the clamp and I'm going to make a few wraps with my artificial sinew. And this will be the foundation for our 5x4 Turk's head knot. And I haven't decided whether or not I want it to be in gray or red. I don't know yet. Just shaping it a little bit. I think I've mentioned this before in a previous video, but oftentimes this artificial sinew, if you give it a few wraps like this, it almost behaves like modeling clay. It's kind of nice. So you can literally just wrap it a few times and take a break and mold it a little bit, you know, like putty. I've decided on red for my transition Turk's head knot. Cut off a 3-piece section and I'm going to thread it into my needle. And we're just tying a simple 5x4, 2-pass 5x4 Turk's head knot. Many tutorials on this knot. If you are unaware of how to tie it, please refer to the links in the description, as I'm not going to go very slowly, but I will go through the knot with you. Over. Ooh, I had a tangle going around the microphone there. That was interesting. Over that one, over and under. Now we can go over and under. Over, under, over and under. There's the first pass. Now we can slide it into place. And tighten things down. Ever since I've been making these videos, I have been told by so many people that they are good ASMR videos, these whip making videos. I suppose it's because of the tone which I talk. I don't try to do that. I really don't. It's just, I guess it's just the way I talk. But if you guys do enjoy that, that's great. I think it's because oftentimes when I'm making these whips, I'm in a very quiet environment. So I feel as though I subconsciously match the environment that I'm in sonically, if you will. So if it's real quiet, I feel like whispering is appropriate. I subconsciously do that. If it's windy out, or if there's a bunch of people screaming in a field, a soccer game going on, or people arguing, I'll naturally stray away from my ASMR tendencies, I guess, because I'll be talking louder and what have you, but maybe I'll do a separate series for those of you who are interested in that, because a lot of you were saying it helps with your anxiety and your stress, which is, that's great. If I can help you with that, that's awesome. Here's our second pass. This knot is optional. It's obviously optional. It's just garnishing the whip, if you will. Doesn't affect the crack at all. Just for looks. Arguably the only knot on a whip that actually serves a purpose functionally for the whip is the heel knot, because it's gives you something to grasp. Transition knots, they don't do anything. They just look nice. Well, hopefully they look nice. I'm not gonna lie, I am nearing the end of this video, but this was a really frustrating video to make. I think it was because of all of the parts where I had to be holding something, especially winding this up was just unbelievably difficult with the camera, because I was constantly moving. I had a long piece of thread that I was winding up, and it was a real pain to keep the camera on what I was doing. So I was getting really upset for a while and had to step away, to be honest. I tried to hide it, but that's true. But in the end, when you finish that last shot, and you get your editing software open and you see it coming together, it's all worth it. It's all worth it, every time. Open that up. And here is the end. It's going to fight me to the death. Tied this knot a little bit tight, a little tighter than I wanted it to be. There we go. That is not the prettiest 5x4 2-pass I've tied, that's for sure. I apologize for that, but there it is. Let's give it a roll after we cut it. So there is before, and there's after our roll. I don't love it, but it works. Alright, well, I have the whip back in the clamp, and we're going to assemble the heel knot foundation for this whip. Now, I'm going to be doing this a little bit differently than Adam does. If you want to check out his methods, please check the link in the description. He does it a really neat way, and I like the checkerboard weave that he has at the end of his whips, but I'm going to go ahead and do my spiral pattern. For the foundation here, I have a 22mm wide piece of neoprene. This is a little bit smaller than 1/4 inch. This is actually 3mm neoprene. And we're going to be using this as the foundation. So I've already trimmed this so that it meets up. I need to clamp that down a little tighter. There we are. So it meets here perfectly. We want to make sure that that is flush, just like every other whip. Got my artificial sinew. Just going to give it a few wraps. Don't let go. Don't let go on me. I have the whip back in the vise once again, and I have here a piece of ungutted parachute cord. I decided to use gray for my little spiral. Wind that up. There we are. A little bit of hockey tape around there. And then we will add some staples. Tipper. I guess Tipper's going to be a part of this whip. Nope, there she goes. Just going to add 4 staples. We'll have to tap those in with a hammer when we're done because the stapler is not quite strong enough to get them all the way to the wood, or into the wood. That one went in pretty good. Number 4. Going to give this a few wraps of artificial sinew to cover up those staple heads, and we'll be ready to tie our 7x6 2-pass 2-tone Turk's head knot. I really like the smell of hot glue. The hot glue gun is cooling off now. I just unplugged it, but the smell of hot glue, particularly high heat guns, glue guns, really they make me reminisce of my childhood because I always was using a hot glue gun. My mother was always letting me use hot glue guns at an early age. Most of society would say I was too young, but God bless her, she let me do it. And got a lot of cool crafts done when I was young, thanks to hot glue guns and my mother for letting me use it. There we go, guys. It's time to tie our 7x6 Turk's head knot. Alright, so we're going to make this knot 2-tone, gray and red like the rest of our whip. I have cut off here a 3.5 foot section of gutted parachute cord. And we're going to begin the knot. I do have a more detailed video of me tying this knot, so if I'm going a little too fast for you, or you just can't see something I'm doing here, feel free to click on that link in the description. Should be a better view for you guys. But I'm going to try to go through this slowly with you. So we're going to do, holding this with my thumb over the top, around the back like this, up the side like that. We're going to go under. We're going to go under this one. Over this one, under this one. Very chilly out here. Over this one, under this one. Over this one and under that one. Over and under. It's kind of nice tying this knot on a stock whip handle because there isn't yet a whip attached to it. You have to worry about the whip getting all tangled up and holding you back from quickly tying the knot. Just gonna even that out a little bit there. Now we're going to expand this into a 7x6. So I'm doing everything this strand does until I get to the top. And now we're going to go over this one, over that one, and now we're following that strand on the left side. Just gonna kind of loosely lay that in place right there. So this one goes over, we're going to go over it as well. This one goes under, we're going to go under it alongside it on the left side now. There we are. Now we're going to split this like that, over that one, under this one. And just laying that there. Don't pull too tightly. Over this one. Over this one here. And splitting this one. And we're gonna split this. That. Well, these guys are making me want to go flying today. I'm gonna go over this one and then split this right here. Just like that. Push this aside a little bit. We're going to go over this one here, and then we're going to dig that strand out from the middle and split it. Just like that. And this is the completion of our first pass. Notice everything is a mess. We need to equalize everything. We're going to do that now. Pushing everything around with my forefinger and my thumb. Like this. Distributing everything evenly. There we go. I'm designing some t-shirts, guys. I have some ideas for some whip-related t-shirts that will be soon available on nickswhipshop.com. Check them out. soon. They'll be available in a week or so. Okay, that looks good enough as far as distribution goes for these passes on the knot. It's time to add our, make sure the camera's still rolling. Excellent. Is it? Yes, it is. We're gonna begin our second strand here in our other color. So I'm gonna pull that, we're gonna measure this up here, and we're gonna cut it, let's see, right there. Detach this. Cut a nice flat cut on our gray strand, and now we will melt these together. Get that out of the way. It's chilly out here, so we have to work fast as far as melting them together. So stick them together, pinch them. Did okay. Trimming the sides of where we fuse those two together. I think that's going to hold very well. Next, taking my other end here, melting the tip, feeding it into our lacing needle, and we can continue. This is pass number 2 of our 7x6. It's follow the leader. Everything that red strand does, we're going to mimic it on the right side. I'm just going to breeze through this quickly as possible. This is not a custom whip, so I'm not worried about everything being perfect on it. There are multiple knots you can tie here at the heel. You can tie a pineapple knot if you want. You can even tie a 5x4 2-pass or a 3-pass. Whatever you really like. Just going to even things out a little bit, push things around, make sure that everything is uniform. Looks good. Continue. I'm lined up exactly with the run runway at Porter County Regional Airport. So every time there's an airplane on final for runway 18 or 36, taking off on 36, northbound runway, the southbound runway, landing, they fly directly overhead. All right. Mailman's cruising. Just about done. All right. Well, we're going to snip off these last strands, and then we will be melting them, and then we will be rolling this knot, and we'll be good to go for our next steps. All right, let's give this thing a roll. All right. Alright, we have a completed handle and also a completed thong. This next step is perhaps my favorite when it comes to making a stock whip, attaching that thong to our handle. This is where the stock whip comes to life and you see all your hard work come to fruition. Alright, we're going to take our thong and we're going to slip it over our handle like this. You can go beyond if you need to. And we're going to take our fall like this, and we're going to slip it through the keeper of the handle. And then here we go, sliding things into place. And there we have our stock whip. Alright. So here's our wax. We're just about ready to go here. Gonna get a quick temperature reading. We are at 201. That is good to go. I'm going to take the whip and into the wax it goes. Using an infrared thermometer to check the temperature on my wax. Let this thing soak up some wax here. Making sure that the whole whip is submerged. So we're going to let that sit in there. Let's kind of wait till it stops bubbling. All those strands right now are contracting and being tightened by the wax, the heat of the wax. Also, the wax is very good for the wood. It seals it. And we'll just let that sit in there for another couple minutes and we'll take it out. Alright, this thing is ready to be taken out of the wax. I have a couple of rags here that I'm going to be going along the whole whip and just removing excess wax so it's not puddling in different places and cracking later on, flaking off. So, the heel first. Air temperature is about 50 degrees, so I'm going to have to work fairly quickly going along this whole whip and removing that excess wax. Years ago, I would just stick the whip in a hot car during the summer, and that was obviously not a very efficient way of doing things, that's for sure. Don't have to do it anymore because I'm removing that excess wax with these rags now, all the way down the fall. And now I'm just going to hang this whip up to dry. Just set it right up here. And I'm just going to let that set for about 5-10 minutes. Alright, the final step on this whip is to attach a cracker. I've tied here a medium weight cracker. And I'm going to use the method where I poke a hole in the end of the fall. Take that out. Slide my cracker through. We're going to open up an eye. And then feed the end of the fall and the cracker through, and then pull that nice and tight. Just like that. And this stock whip is ready to be test cracked. Guys, thank you so much for stopping by and watching this video. I hope you enjoyed building this whip, and I hope you all learned something new. I'll see you in the next one. So our first, the Winnebago Concepts and Engineering Department have developed a multifunctional bathroom privacy. Now these first strands will also double, but it will work. I guarantee it. How do I convince you? Now straight my way. Yeah, just try not to look at the lens, but just kind of look straight in this direction. There you go. Hey everyone, it's Nick with the Whip Shop, and on today's video, we're going to be building from start to finish this 5-foot 10-flat nylon bullwhip. Yeah, bullwhip. Hey everyone, it's Nick with the Whip Shop, and on today's video, this is a disc golf course, so I'm waiting to get hit in the head with a disc.